Right, hello everyone. Welcome to Bearhill Husky. My name's Valentine, and as a special treat at the moment, we're going to go for we're taking some of our dogs, 30 of our dogs. We're going to see if we can drive up to Halti. So we've loaded up the dogs into our trailer here, and somewhere in the car we've got all our sleds up on the top here, all nicely lined up and ready to go. And we arrived at the petrol station in Karasavanta, sorry, and up there is the trail that we're going to leave on. We're going to drive through the night in this nice clear cold weather, and we're going to drive till tomorrow morning, and then we're going to set up our tents as soon as it gets too warm, and we're going to sleep through the day. That's basically it. Laze in the warmth of the day and drive in the cool of the night. So good morning everyone, welcome back. This is Bearhill Husky with Valentine. A little bit different scenery today. Last night we drove up to a place called Karasavanta. We parked our car there, and now we are off on a little adventure. We are trying to get to, if it all works out, the highest point in Finland. So over here is my team, very much the same team we drove yesterday, the one that you saw out on the lake. And then back here we have Olli, and Jana and Emily are coming up as well. Clap! Hup, hup. So we are now traveling. We left last night. The aim was to do about 90 kilometers. As I was explaining, we left from a place called Karasavanta. Not much happening in Karasavanta. Its claim to fame is that the Lestadius religious movement started there many years ago. But anyway, we parked the car there last night, we hooked up our dog teams and we left. The aim is to drive about 90 kilometers or 100 kilometers, 80 or 100, somewhere there, to Tertmis, where we're going to set up our camp. And we're going to spend a little, hopefully it'll get colder. We'll wait for the cold tonight. And then we are going to drive our dog teams up to the top of Halti, which is Finland's highest mountain. It is 1,500 and something meters high, so it's the highest point in Finland, and we hope to get there. I'm not sure if we will succeed, but we're at least going to try. Now, dog teams are moving nicely. We stopped in a place called Puusasvaara. It's a shelter cabin. While we were driving, we had a little break there, fed our dogs, had our breakfast, and now we're continuing on our way. So, same team as I was driving yesterday out on when we had this adventure on the lake, the icy lake. So we are running Jin. This time I have Nyala in front of her. She is moving quite nicely. Then we have Cookie and Dussie, and then we are running Mamba and Bappu. And then we have Chobi, who is of course going to the toilet on camera, together with Rusina. And then at the back here we have Mickey and our good friend Bantu, who is also having a go on the toilet. The trails have been interesting. The start was very hair-raising. It was dark. I didn't have the GoPro on. If you would have had it on, you would have noticed that it was pretty scary. We took a few wrong turns, almost drove what could basically be a cliff face, went down it with all the dog teams. Very punchy snow that wasn't holding the team, so we were actually going, or at least my sled was going through the crust of the snow and getting stuck really badly. But eventually we managed to get out of away from the river valley, and we managed to get away from the river valley, and things have cooled off. Klar, hup. And the trails have hardened up. There is still some soft spots every now and again, but we'll manage them as we go along. So this is the morning pooper stop, the Brown Mile, as I have heard it being called. So when you leave out in the morning, the dogs are all fed in their stomachs, and then as soon as we start moving, they all need to go to the toilet. Happens to me as well in the morning, except I need to drink a lot of coffee to get this to happen. Anyway, same for the dogs. In the morning they start moving, the bowels start moving as well. And the first 1.5, 2 kilometers, we have a lot of stopping to do. It's not particularly cold. Yesterday when we started drive during the day with the sun out, it was actually a balmy +4, +5 in the sun, very warm. But by the time we started driving, it was almost midnight, and it was about -2, -3. I think today it's about +1, a little bit on the warm side. So we're going to drive slowly for this next 60 to 70 kilometers that we're doing. Now, funnily enough, this particular track that we did starting in Kaarasuvanto and driving up to Halti and back again, 10 years ago, 2010, I was here with a good friend of mine, Pano. He was my handler back then. And we drove with 2 dog teams. We drove all the way there. We had Lumi with us, and we had Karhu and Whitey, and there was a lot of these old stalwarts. And Bim, Lumi's brother, was one of the lead dogs back then. We had a lot of these old stalwarts with us. And we started exactly the same way. We drove up to Kaarasuvanto, parked our car there, and left. And it was pretty nice. Some things never stayed the same, or never changed, sorry. When we left in 2010, we had loaded up all our stuff, and we were so very well prepared for our very first major Arctic expedition. It was the first time I was going to do something like this high above the tree line. And we loaded up our sleds, and we had to go up this little incline to where we could actually, the trailhead starts. And we loaded up the sleds, and we thought, let's push them there. And we couldn't budge the sleds. They were so heavily loaded that it took 2 of us and a lot of effort and huffing and puffing to get these sleds up to the trailhead. Now, I can only tell you that we were pretty worried, because we thought our expedition was over before it even started, because we figured out that if the sled is this heavy, how is our 8 dog teams going to be able to pull it? Well, we hooked up our 8 dog teams, and they were my old style of dogs. They were big, chunky, massive dogs, and they just blasted off down the trail with no problem whatsoever. Well, fast forward 10 years, a little bit older, a little bit wiser, not as big chunky dogs, a nicer sled, nicer car, and the same thing happened. We loaded up our sleds, and they were so heavy we could barely budge them. However, this time I didn't really freak out, knowing what would happen, and indeed off we went full speed. The dogs supercharged, because finally they're running on something new, a new trail. It is the excitement that exploring new tracks and new places generates in these dogs. It is amazing. It's something that many people don't see. Long distance sled dog driving gets a bit of a bad name every now and again, sometimes deserved, but mostly not. But what people don't realize is these dogs, it's almost like they love exploring. They just love going and seeing new places with or without their owner. It doesn't really matter, or their musher, but they just want to go and run and smell and see. It's almost like they're trail junkies. And to be honest, I'm a bit like that as well. I can get carried away. I want to go see what's around the corner, what's around the next corner. Let's just keep on going a little bit more and see what's over there. Hey, that looks interesting. Let's go check it out. And when I'm on the trail, that's very often what drives me. And I feel that these dogs have the same. They just want to keep on exploring and seeing what's up ahead of them and what is around the corner. What sight, what smell. And the cool thing is, they're just such amazing dogs that they can keep on doing it and doing it and doing it all day long. Well, we do have to stop and feed them and take breaks, but anyway, they can do it pretty long. Cheat, cheat, cheat. Now, what has tended to happen at the moment is some snowmobiles have driven over here with warmer weather, and they have sometimes cut quite deep grooves in what otherwise would have been a very nice trail. And particularly with this weather, if you look around, it's very white. It's a bit cloudy, but bright enough that actually it sort of irritates your eyes. I'm going to have to put my sunglasses on, even though there is no sun. and it's very difficult to actually see where the track is. So a lot of these grooves and irritating things, they sort of, you only notice them just as the sled is hitting them, and it can be very irritating, and if you're not careful it'll actually throw you off the sled. Alright, the team is finding its rhythm. We are cruising along nicely. If I check my phone or my GPS on the phone, we're doing about cruising along at 15 to 18 kilometers per hour, which is very, very decent. And seems to be that the teams are following behind as well, so even some of our more less experienced touring dogs are doing pretty well, cruising along nicely as well. So the trail's hard. They promised snow today, but it seems to be more coming down as little drizzle every now and again than snow, which is a pity because I would have liked to have some snow to soften off the tracks a little bit. You can hear the sound of the sled going over the crunchy, icy, punchy snow, and it's hard on the dog's feet, so that's why we've got the booties on. Now up here this far north, as you can see, the only vegetation that we have, or that you can see at the moment, is these birches. And the birch is actually a very hardy tree. The further north you get, it changes. Scandinavia is quite special, as in Scandinavia, pines stop or continue longer in the further north than spruce. In the rest of the world, the more north you get, slowly pines die out and then or stop growing. Spruce continues, then spruce stops growing, and then we get willows. Sorry, I'm mangling this. So then we get birches, and when the birches stop growing, there's willows. Willows are probably the toughest trees around. They grow practically everywhere, even up in the highest tundra. In some places on Greenland you will see really small little willows eking out an existence in some of the small little nooks and crannies everywhere. Sometimes it's just between rocks or in a little hollow in the landscape. But up here, these what you see here is birches. As I was explaining in Scandinavia, we have a special thing that pines continue further north than spruce. So as you go from south to north, you've got first the spruce stop growing, then the pines stop growing, then the birches stop growing, and finally you have only willows left. It's funny, a lot of these places look very familiar, even though the last time I was here was 10 years ago or 11 years ago. I've been here three times. Once with Pano, 2 times with a friend of mine, Inge from Holland. If I remember correctly, it was 2 times Inge. If you see the video, let me know if it was once or twice. We have driven through here. Up. There's a lot of dipping for snow. Some of the dogs didn't eat their breakfast. They didn't want to have their soup, and now they're thirsty and constantly dipping for snow, which is very irritating because it puts the team off. So just as your team finds a rhythm, some dog dips and then the rhythm is gone. The team needs to find its tempo again. I'm not sure if you can hear me because we are in the middle of nowhere. Actually, we're not entirely in the middle of nowhere, but we are standing next to the trail between Hetta and Kilpisjärvi, next to the signpost for the Hirvasvuopo shelter cabin. Klaar? Hup. Off we go. We are out here together with Emily, Jana, Ollie and myself, and about 30 dogs, and we're getting them some camping experience. So we just passed Hirvasvuopo. We're going to cross the Lätsäseno River pretty soon, and once we do that we're going to stop for a little lunch break, because then we're halfway to our destination for today, which is Termisjärvi. Termisjärvi is a cabin in the middle of a big valley. I'm going to get some footage of that for you as well. So, but anyway, last night at about 11:30 we started to drive. At night it was nice and cold, a very clear sky, and the funny thing was, even at midnight you could still see the glow of the sunset on the horizon, so it actually didn't get really dark. The trail is very beautiful, but it is quite hard, and in some places it's treacherous because there is only a hard little crust on it, and then there's a lot of soft snow underneath, and the dogs sink through this, or the sled sinks through it, and then we're in trouble. So also it's been very warm, the snowmobiles have driven over, it's frozen up again, so it's actually also quite aggressive on the feet, so that's why we're running most of the dogs in booties today. As I was explaining, we wouldn't do this out on the frozen lake or the icy lake for danger of it's too slippery, but out here on the snowmobile trail, which has been ripped up like this, booties is what we do. Today we're going to do about or since we started driving, our aim is to run about 100 kilometers, 80 to 100, and then tomorrow we are going to do 40 again. Now you can see how bumpy this is. Picture this track. This is because the snowmobilers have gone over it, as is a full right, but when they come over with this kind of weather, it actually rips up the track and it freezes really hard again, which can be nasty to drive on. But now my aim is to get some water out, so I've got the water canisters we got in there. The only problem is a bit dodgy. I don't trust this side very much, so I'm gonna have to lie down and extend my hand into this cold water to see if I can. Snowmobiles kept coming over here. This is a snow bridge over here, so let's see if I can get us some fresh water. Ooh, it's already collapsing right over here. I better be careful. So this needs a little bit of finesse. Oh, there we go. Okay, that's one. Get the other one. But it's very good water. The scenery is slowly changing. The team's moving along quite nicely, but the scenery is slowly changing. You can see there's less and less trees. We are slowly heading up to above the tree line. It's getting a bit warm at the moment. The trail is softening up. Hup, hup, hitcha, hitcha, jongens. Hitcha, bravia, bravia. And you can see that spring is here. These little spots are starting to show up. They're actually really nice places to camp if you so wish, out on there. But we are not ready to camp yet. Up ahead you can see the trails are changing and getting more and more open. Weather forecast for today is pretty warm-ish, a little bit above zero. They promised some snow, but I haven't seen it yet. Maybe comes later today. But the temperatures are going to drop. Tomorrow's going to be a colder day, and tomorrow is the day that we actually want to attempt to get to the top of the highest point of Finland. So if it all works out, we're lucky that we managed to have a cold day, or a cold couple of days, on the day that we're actually trying to get to the top of the mountain. So beautiful scenery, absolutely fantastic here. Teams are, well, I can't actually see them behind us, but they are coming behind. Jana, Emily and Ollie and the dogs are doing fantastic. Actually remember this spot. I thought it was fantastic first time I came around. Still think it's fantastic coming around now. So the trail is marked either with sticks with ribbons, or otherwise these poles with crosses on them. It could be red crosses, or just crosses like this. In the really kind of wide open spots where you might lose them in a storm, they're spaced quite close together, so to get from one to another one is very easy, even in whiteout conditions or in kind of circumstances that you might not be able to see the trail. Funnily enough, in Finland this is a snowmobile trail marker, so it's something that is designed for snowmobiles. In Sweden, however, it is a marker for a hiking trail. Now, I went out, up, hitcho jongens, hitcho. This warm weather is taking the energy out of the dogs. Anyway, I was in Sweden. We went to what you call Riksgränsen, Abisko area, to go snowmobiling. It was with the boys from Wild Nordic or Unique Lapland back in the day. And I had gotten a snowmobile from them, and we rented a little trailer. We took the kids with, and off we went. And I decided it was a good idea to follow these track markers, trail markers. Now, I thought we wanted to go up and get some hot chocolate in a hotel up in the mountains, and you needed to just follow the trail and then turn left and follow the sticks. Now, as we went along, the moment that we needed to turn left, there was this big blowout. There was snow swirling all around, and we couldn't actually see anything. The only thing I could see was dead ahead one of these trail markers. So I decided that, well, that must be it. That's where we're going. So I took the snowmobile with my wife on the back and the kids in the sled behind, and off we went. And the trail got crazier and crazier and crazier. It was, you know, I was going, at some point I even thought to myself, I can understand why these Swedish snowmobilers need these extreme machines, because the places that they build their tracks, this is absolutely amazing. No sane person would take a snowmobile here. And I was doing all kinds of, well, at least for me, nifty driving with this big family sled behind, and we were going up into the mountains and down very steep hills and sideway gradients and all kinds of things. Yip yip, hitcho jongens. So, oh, look at that piece of trail. That is fantastic. What a view. Anyway, at some point we come across this enormous gorge. It is a straight drop down, practically, filled up with really deep snow at the bottom. And we're standing on the top, and it's kind of like this pointy little ledge that we're on. We can't reverse. I can't go forward. I can't go backwards. I'm kind of stuck with this sled. We can't move anymore. And on the other side of this big ravine, there is the next trail marker. So I'm scratching my head and I'm wondering, how the hell do we get from here to there? So I apologize to my wife. I say, look, I'm really sorry, but I don't know. We got to go home. We got to turn around. But I can't turn around here. I got to go around, take the snowmobile, get back behind us, and then come up behind us, and then we can leave. So I decided to take the snowmobile down into this gorge and drove it to the best of my snowmobiling skills, which are, you know, okay, but not fantastic. And managed to crash it, well, not crash it, but roll it, get it stuck in the snow. And I had to phone my wife and say, well, I'm sorry, this is going to take a little longer. You can imagine my wife stuck in the middle of nowhere with a snowmobile sled and two hungry kids. She was none too pleased, I can tell you that. Anyway, eventually I managed to backtrack, find my trails, come up behind this little sled, get it out from this ledge safely, turn around, and we drive back to Abisko with the snowmobile. Once we get there, we regroup ourselves, and then on the way actually into Abisko, we saw where we went wrong. We saw this track, so we warmed ourselves up and then decided, well, we came here to get this hot chocolate at the thing, we're going anyway. So we got up back on the snowmobile, drove up, found the trail, and this time drove there safely, had our hot chocolate, and came back down again. But that was the moment that I learned that in Sweden it's a hiking trail, and that the sticks are actually for the snowmobiles. So if you ever go snowmobiling in Sweden, do not follow the red crosses, not like you do in Finland. Anyway, that was a funny story for me and snowmobiling up in the mountains. Now, one thing I forgot to tell, or just to add to that story that I was telling, that when we were driving the snowmobile, some of these places we had to go almost up vertical walls with this, and we were pulling this little sled behind, and the sled had this little fabric canopy that you could, you know, sort of open on clothes. And Rune was strapped in, my boy, he was strapped in a baby seat in there nicely, and Saga, my daughter, was in there as well, strapped in. And at some point in time we were going so fast over such bumpy trails to avoid getting that the canopy clapped open, and they were basically sitting there going full speed, yelling their heads off. And I didn't notice because I couldn't stop, because in that particular spot, if I did stop, we'd get horrendously stuck with the snowmobile and the sled, so I had to keep on going. And to this day, they still remember that ride. They were quite small, but they remembered very well. Check out this fantastic scenery. This is just amazing. It was, the sun comes out behind the clouds, it gets quite warm, so we stop every now and again just to let them cool off, and then we go again. It's about 20 to 25 kilometers to the cabin that we're going. We just stopped to take a couple of pictures and collect the teams and wait for everyone. And I remember that it was exactly the same place I'd stopped before, because when you come up, this particular stretch here is the first time you can see the mountains, and the trail up ahead is so well defined without the trees. I actually also just changed Bonto up to the front. All the other dogs are getting a bit, I wouldn't say tired, but they're warm. Bonto was at the back, yelling his head off, wanting to keep on going. So I thought, well, if he's shown that much enthusiasm for his job, let's see what happens when we put him up and lead. And I must say, he's taken up the speed of the team up a little bit. Let's see if he manages to also do it when the going gets tough. But it's him and Nyala up in the front. Looks good so far. Well, the weather has changed a little bit. The snow that they promised is coming in. The temperature is still a little bit above zero. So the good thing is that at least the trail is softening up. However, the bad thing is the trail is softening up. So far, pretty solid base underneath it. But with the fresh snow on top, of course, it's going to get a little bit harder for the dogs to pull. Now we're about 10 kilometers out from the cabin, maybe another hour to go. Some of the smaller teams in our group are starting to slow down a bit. So about an hour to get to Termis. Now, one of the things that, as we're driving along, checking out this amazing scenery here, on that side over there, there's a reindeer fence. But anyway, as we're driving along, one of the things that I was looking at is and pondering over was the weather report, because it seems to be that now we're going to get a little bit of snow. It's a bit warm. Tonight the temperature will go down, but as the temperature goes down, the wind starts to pick up, and pretty soon, by tomorrow evening, it's going to be blowing pretty hard. It's going to be about 8 meters a second, 9 meters a second, and of course out here in the exposed open, that kind of wind speeds are not that comfortable. And then, to make matters worse, Friday evening, Saturday morning, it's going to start snowing. With the same wind speeds, it's going to start snowing. So basically we're getting a snowstorm. And it's almost a 100-kilometer run back to the car from Ternis. So if we spend tomorrow going up onto the mountain to the top, it would probably be very good weather for that, especially if we get it done early enough so that we beat that wind. But that means that we end up having to do this run back to our car, this 100 kilometers in a snowstorm. We could get lucky, the wind could be in the back, but unfortunately when this happens you never get lucky. So tonight we're going to have to weigh our options and see if tomorrow we even dare go to the top of the mountain, or if we do probably a wiser thing and turn around and just go back to the car and come back some other day. Not yet sure what it is, but I'm sure that tonight in the tent we're going to have some interesting discussions and options and analyzing weather reports. Alright, we arrived at the cabin. These days some things have changed. There is an official dog park with some tying down things. We're going to see if we can drive the dog team there. The battery is very low, so I'm not sure I'm going to be able to capture it all. Up. Oh. Oh. We're going to pass the cabin and then we're going to make a little G-turn somewhere over here. Let's see if she'll take it. G! 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 Fisherman. G! Gin, gin, G! Hitcho! Up! Up! G! 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 Hitcho, gin! Hitcho! Oh! Hitcho! Hitcho! G! G! Hitcho! Hitcho, gin! Oh! Hitcho! So we're going up. You can see the parking space over there. G! Hitcho. And there we go. Wow. Good morning, everyone. We spent the last night in Termes cabin, and it's a very beautiful day, sun shining, but the wind is picking up. And last night we sat and discussed, and we decided that we were going to turn around and abandon our attempt to get to the top of Halti. To do that, we would have had to drive 40 kilometers to the top today, 40 back, and then spend another night at Termes cabin, and then drive tomorrow 80, well 100 kilometers almost home. So this would have, in good conditions, it would have been easy for the dogs to do, but the weather report has promised that the wind speed is going to pick up and it's going to start snowing. So by all, or at least on all the information I have, tomorrow is going to be a snowstormy day, and here at Termes cabin, where we would have to spend the night tomorrow evening, or tonight we would have to spend it. We'd be back here again. It would be 11 to 12 meters per second winds, and tomorrow out on the trail there would be 8 meter to 10 meter wind speeds with snow. Now I have no intention of driving my dogs through that kind of weather at the moment. So something that I hope that in the future they will be able to do, but there's supposed to be a fun camping trip, and that would not happen. So we decided not to go up to Halti and instead use this day, where they promised high winds but nice weather and no snow, to use that to get back to the car. Over there we have Termes cabin itself, and then that's the valley looking towards the east, and then slowly that's the dog spot over there, my gear, walking back from the cabin where we spent the night. This is the woodshed, and every proper Finnish cabin also has a recycling point and rubbish collection point back there, and that is the trail we would have done but are not doing, down that way. There Emily is booting up, just getting all the little pieces of snow out from between the foot before the booties go on. And off we go. So, wind in the back, so it feels really kind of like with the sun out, it feels pretty warm. But trust me, if we were going the other way, it would not be as comfortable. So we have to go about 100 kilometers today to get back to the car. We've abandoned our plan to get to Halti due to the weather coming in. Wind is going to pick up and it's going to start snowing, so to avoid that we're going home, or at least back to the car. And we'll probably break this into 2 runs, a 50 kilometer and a 50 kilometer, so that we go to Hirvasvuop about now, and then tomorrow we go to all the way through to Karasavanta. But let's see how the dogs do. If they go better, we'll go further. If slower, then it takes 2 days, and then we'll have to do part of it in the storm tomorrow. We're now at the crossroads. This is a place where down that way is Raitjärvi, the Sami village, and back behind us is Kilpisjärvi. Ahead of us, that direction, is Hetta and Enontekio, and far away there you can see some reindeer herders. They're going back down to the road, so about 30 kilometers that way there is a road. Now, we could have started and finished there, but we are going to Karasavanta, so as you can see, 25 kilometers. Klaar! Klaar! Up! And somehow, miraculously, every time we stop, our little Nyala manages to get her knickers on a twist, so I have to stop again. Ooh-ah, 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 ooh-ah. Let's go sort her out quickly. Yes, doesn't she look a little innocent? Doesn't she look innocent? Come, Nyala. 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 Sure. Up. And off we go. When they move, this team can move very beautifully. Jin is actually one of the ugliest running ones in this team, if you consider it. And Mickey is holding his own pretty okay. I'm pretty impressed for an old boy who came into this team with more experience but less training. He's doing pretty well. Beetje Mickey. Braaf je beestje. One thing that is pretty clear though is that Vappu does not prefer to run at speed. She just cannot keep up with the big boy team. She tries, but it's a bit demoralizing for her to run at this tempo. So I put her back in the middle of the team where she can just focus on doing her thing without the stress of running or leading. She can just focus on her running. Now, on a day like this, it's actually nicer to drive just on the left there. The snow, it's just as hard, but the snow is a bit smoother. So for the dog's feet, it's actually nicer to run. But again, as I was explaining, the dogs like to find or to follow a well-defined track. And it seems to be that where the snowmobiles have recently driven, that's a little bit more defined. And therefore they're running on that. And it's very difficult to convince them that, hey, over there is a nice smooth track to run, because this is the one that they can see well. Cheat! 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 Jin is willing to believe me, but Nyala, our inexperienced leader, does not see the point in running somewhere that she doesn't recognize as a trail. And then she works against Jin. This is the Puusasvaara cabin. On the way in, this was the first place we passed. We spent maybe an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours here. 3, having a quick lunch break. Or dinner break, actually, by that time. Let's quickly go have a look inside, see if it's been left behind. Well, yes, this is how cabins should be left, with at least some firewood and starting sticks and things. Fine detail is matchbox, a couple of matches sticking out, and a candle. If someone comes in here who is freezing, he can doesn't have to open the box. He can light a candle, and once the candle is burning, the person can either start a fire with this or warm their hands. Small detail like this can save lives, so very important to do. And this can save lives, this can save souls, or so they say if you're into that. We're just going to wait for the rest of the teams over here. They're a bit behind. And lock our door like this. There we go. I decided to run. Jin had been leading quite some time. She's doing really well. Vappu didn't exactly make the cut. She was not able to run at the intensity we need. Or need, we don't need anything but hope. But I put Nyala now next to Rusina up in the front, and let's see how that goes. It means that we do not have much experience, but for sheer athleticism we have some very good dogs up at the front, and they're doing a good job. I'm going to let them run back to the car, see how that goes. Okay, so picked up a passenger. Wallo developed a limp. So with a limp you can't run, so that means he has to travel as a passenger. So we picked him up. I've made some space in my sled, and now he is bagged here, and the rest of the run he'll be staying there. Alright, we are almost back in Karesuvanto. Taking a slightly different route back. There seemed to be a difference between the officially marked snowmobile trail and the track in reality, and the one on the map. So now we are driving the one on the map, which is a lot more fun than driving the one in reality. And just one update on our dogs here. This fantastic. I am running Nyala and Rusina in lead together, 2 young females. They're not yet even 2 years old, and they are doing fantastic. They're taking commands, they are looking for the best and most efficient way to run, they're avoiding holes in the trail, they're not falling in the trap of running on the obvious marked track, but have learned how to find the right trail or the smoother trail, not the ripped up snowmobile trail. So they've also figured out what is the most comfortable track to run on. They're keeping up a speed which I have never been able to do with my dogs before, and it's really, I'm just so impressed. It's amazing. 2 years old, not even, and to be able to do this, I'm very happy with them. Of course, behind them I'm running Jin and Cookie. They both are pretty experienced dogs, and on a few occasions when they've made the wrong decision or not made the right decision fast enough, then Jin and Cookie have shown them and given them some hints where to go, and then they do it. So this is one way that you can train the lead dogs. Once they have the idea of what leading is, you can run them in front of some experienced lead dogs. So they are actually doing the leading, but in case of, you know, when they forget or they don't know, then there is always those 2 experienced lead dogs behind who can explain or help them, give them a hint about what the right solution is or the right outcome is. So in this case, a few times Jin and Cookie corrected or hinted at the right solution for Nyala and Rosina. I just have to say how impressed I am with Rosina and Nyala up at the front. Like an experienced set of lead dogs. The skills that they have shown on the strip, this run has taken them to another level. I think that it has forged them, hardened them, wizened them a lot. It just goes to show sometimes the best way to do this is just to go and do it. You have to go out and drive. And there is a lot of things to be learned on a trip like this. They were exposed to wind and to camping. We had different trails. We had punchy trails, hard trails, crunchy trails, sharp trails, wind-blown trails. We didn't have any deep snow. I'm happy about that, but that's not what this time of year is for. We've had uphills and downhills and headwinds and wind from behind. So we've had midnight mushing, we've had daylight mushing, warm weather mushing and cold weather mushing on this trip. It's been pretty eventful. I think that all the dogs who joined us on this tour have come back wiser, better sled dogs. Okay, well, that was the end of our adventure in Kilpisjärvi. We decided that we had to return to avoid the storm and or at least the bad weather. So that Saturday we drove home, and or Friday evening, sorry. As you see, the battery ran out just before we got home or back to the car. So we arrived back at the car, and it was a question of feeding our dogs, loading up, and then driving home. It was a pretty long trip back, or a long drive home in the dark. I think we arrived at 4 o'clock in the morning or something back at the kennel. The cool thing was the dogs did learn a lot. They learned to run in the wind and to deal with wind and to be out in the wind. It is clear that we have to do this again and a little bit more often, because our problems were that they had not eaten very well, and they only started eating once we were on the way back. So there is this kind of like 120 kilometer rule. They will start to eat after 120 kilometers. So what we decided is next time we go out, we're not even going to bother trying to feed them that much in those first 120 kilometers, because they're not interested. So the idea is, if you offer and they refuse, or if we offer snacks and food to them and they refuse, then we're actually teaching them to refuse food. So the next trip that we do with these, the next long ones, it's going to be one where they will not eat anything for the first 120 kilometers. So we won't offer them food when they don't want it. We'll wait for them to want it and then start offering the food. My experience is that they will start snacking afterwards. But it was a great trip. I think I learned something, my dogs learned something, and I'm very sure that Jana, Ollie and Emily learned something as well. So I'm looking forward to doing it again someday.